Thank you for joining me for Integrative NeuroArts. This presentation will cover three different art forms that has been used as therapeutic initiatives in order to deal with certain complex symptoms and how those symptoms have been alleviated. A little bit about the clinical background. Um, So I have had inattentive ADHD. I also may have autism, but I'm yet to receive a formal diagnosis. I have been diagnosed with severe depression and severe anxiety. I have several sensory differences with respect to light. I cannot go out and outside when the sun is out. It actually hurts my eye. I also have a very high myopic power. Um, I also had several instances of experiencing allostatic overload, which led to secondary social fatigue. Several of these uh, is a, is in the aspect of cognitive and emotional and social fatigue. I've also been diagnosed with PTSD from having survived multiple sexual assaults and childhood trauma. So, trauma re experiencing was pretty common. It often led to sleep disturbances, loss of appetite, having a sleep onset of 9 a.m. So the therapeutic approaches that I have used are of three types. One was cathartic imprints, which was used to address anxiety. Noctivox was used to address trauma re-experiencing, and phonosonics was used to address cognitive BEM. Let's start with anxiety intervention. We all know that anxiety has its basis in rumination, and quite often rumination occurs due to an hyperactive default mode network. What I began to observe is that approximately around 30 minutes of rumination periods preceded an anxiety attack. And the only way in which I could have addressed the anxiety attack is if I could address this 30-minute rumination period that preceded it. So I decided to adopt methods that I have been using since I was a child. I would freehand draw on these walls. It eventually moved into me transitioning into tiles at some given time point in my life. And I never really looked at it from a therapeutic point of view until recently, wherein I decided to implement that as an anxiety intervention. So, what exactly happened was during those 30 minutes of rumination, I began using ceramic tiles and just another Sharpie pen to continue my freehand drawing on these tiles. Uh, I think that the permanence of the surface kind of created that grounding impact, and it also created a memory link to those childhood periods wherein I would be drawing on the walls. So I believe tiles served a similar anchoring when it came to that memory. And what I started to observe with the design specifically was that the more intricate freehand designs uh, that emerged on the tile, it sort of ended up signifying that there was a lot of anxiety that needed an intervention that demanded this degree of intricate designs. Um, so when you look at the images that follow, please look into these aspects because you will see a greater variety of these intricate designs, and then you will see shapes, forms, faces, animals, and I believe the shapes, forms, faces, animals have come out of a space wherein the anxiety was not that uh, potent in the way that one would see it in these other intricate designs. Uh, so so you would start to so what I observed was I'm still doing these styles even today. So what I've observed in that process is that my tiles have become more shapely, like they represent a particular character, they represent a particular time point in history. There is a lot of cognitive input to going in deciding what to sketch, what not to sketch, what face do I sketch, all of these things. Uh, as opposed to the tiles that I was designing before during prior to these anxiety attacks, wherein I would be observing just freehand intricate designs, and it would be very hard for someone to actually find uh, connection as to what does this style represent. Uh, it's very hard to find that story. So, so it's been a while since I've had an anxiety attack, and I will go into the details of that later. This intervention aids in flipping the switch from the DMN, that is the default mode network, to a possible altered network of functioning, which involves either the salience, dorsal attention network, visual, and the sensory motor network. It could involve all of them, or it could be involving a combination of them. Again, I don't have access to an fMRI, so I cannot observe that in real time. But should you want to take this up as a research opportunity, this could be something. I Coming to phonasonics. So, when we talk about post exertional malaise, we often look at it from physical exertion, even the way in which we assess if someone is going through PEM is by looking into various categories under physical exertion. What we don't account for is a lot of the exertion that happens on the cognitive and the emotional plane. I had gone through four PEM crashes, and I had designated three of them as the controls, and one out of them and all of this was impromptu, wherein I decided, okay, let me just try phonasonics out. So, phonasonics is a methodology which involves uh, using music. And I am a trained singer, I'm a trained vocalist. So, it involves bringing in certain melodic arrangements of scales into conception upon engaging with animals. And the intervention involved me to check myself into a farm for at least 2 weeks or so, engage with the animals, and somehow impromptu in that engagement, these melodic compositions came out. And I'm addressing this as an intervention. Why? Because it did alleviate a lot of the symptoms. So the first PEM crash was triggered by a cognitive exertion. I was working way into the night. I was presenting a lot of my research abroad, and I was presenting it from here in California. So I had to stay up in the middle of the night, and it was back-to-back presentations, which resulted in me staying up till 9 a.m. and actually falling asleep only after 9 a.m. So as a result of this cognitive exertion, I started to have some physical presentations of severe tenosynovitis. And this is when your thumb and your index finger can no longer move. So it has frozen. And I started observing that in my non dominant hand, which was extremely interesting considering that I was not using that hand for typing or anything, but somehow I was observing that. And when I had gotten myself checked out, the doctor had actually suggested that, oh, maybe you are pregnant and that can cause this issue. And I wasn't pregnant at all. I don't have any kids. I don't take care of kids at all. So this was quite an issue and it was not addressed for quite a while. I was uh, I was experiencing those symptoms for about 2.5 weeks at least. The second crash that happened, it happened due to and it happened with respect to emotional issues and cognitive exertion as well. And it resulted in an extreme lethargy, burnout, and brain fog to a level wherein I was not able to even start working and do anything. And I would want to sleep the entire day. So that's when I administered phonosonics and I was in a farm for 2 weeks. So the crash number three was triggered due to emotional distress and interpersonal conflict, and it resulted in exhaustion, cognitive shutdown, acute flu-like sickness behavior, and non-stop coughing, sore throats. There was no pathogen exposure, nothing of that sort. The crash number four was triggered by severe emotional distress and cognitive load, resulted in exhaustion, burnout, loss of appetite, sleep deprivation, complete shift in the circadian clock, with sleep onsets being at 4 to 6 a.m. Which brings me to the CPTSD trauma re-experiencing. And like the other two interventions, this also happened to be in the spur of the moment, where upon experiencing intrusive re-experiences, uh, especially caused due to this PTSD that I've had over the past few years now. It included a lot of flashbacks, emotional experiences, a lot of self critical phrases kept coming in, uh, conversation tidbits kept coming in. There was a distorted timeline, and it had this feeling of I was either watching the experience as a third person or I was becoming the person who was experiencing that trauma. And somehow, at some point during this intrusive re experiencing episode, there was a lot of these emotional flooding that somehow resulted in me picking up a paper and pen and writing whatever was going on in my mind. Uh, Post this whole experience, uh, I realized that whatever I had written was in a poetic format, although because the initial record was covered in blotches and frayed tears and pen scratches and all of that due to the intensity of emotional flooding. So I decided to transcribe it through a secondary phase of rewriting. And this clean transcription that followed, I ended up aging the paper, transcribing on that aged paper, and decided to seal the paper with a wax seal and date it on the day that I had retranscribed it, uh, which also followed with me mounting it on the wall. And it kind of looks like an ancient scroll. And somehow, while I was doing this whole process, it never really occurred to me that I had created a ritual. And in that creation of that ritual, even certain things that I have selected as, okay, you're going to use an aged paper, signifying that whatever has happened in the past. You're going to seal it with a wax seal that, okay, this is it. You've experienced it. You've written it down. You're going to seal it. And you have mounted it as a to probably represent this idea that you did not get the justice that you deserved. People didn't really listen to you when the trauma was going on. Justice systems often failed you. Society often failed you when you were going through this. So here is a record of everything that has happened. And that record has been now stamped and sealed, and it has the on date on which it was actually sealed. And this whole thing sort of created a healing ritual and a process through which I could process these traumas. And some I am not writing it out of re-experiencing trauma. In fact, I haven't had a PTSD attack for quite a while now because this particular process served as an anchor, as a soundboard. And I acted as a jury, I acted as the judge for the experiences that I have experienced as a victim as well. So, in taking on these roles, I have somehow created a situation wherein I no longer have these PTSD attacks ever since I have started writing. Uh, that most of my poetry now deals with external forms of oppression as opposed to internal traumas that I have experienced in life. So let's look at the summary of these interventions. The cathartic imprints involved me sketching on the tiles. It was last administered on August 1st, 2025. Um, it has been a year since its intervention, and I haven't had a single anxiety attack. Uh, Phonasonics, the symptom window was around the same point, August 2025 to about February 2026. The intervention was during the crash number 2, which was October 2nd to 7th. And the control crashes 3 and 4 continued till February, but uh, after phonasonics for a week, the body was extremely energetic. So I look into this whole process. Uh, March, I took a month off. April, I worked 2 weeks during the month. May, 3 weeks of work. June, month off. July, worked the whole month, and around in August, 2.5 weeks of work. So this has been my process in 2026, from March to August. After me not doing phonasonics, I am still experiencing PEM. I'm still experiencing PEM following the control crash number 4. Why? Because the only way in which I can ensure I do not crash again is by taking these months off and these weeks off. Noctivox were the intervention was very sporadic. This was where I was writing poetry. So it was first implemented in March 2022 at the height of me experiencing PTSD. However, following the increase in ICE operations and political unrest in my home country, the poetry has now turned from questioning internal systems of oppression to external symptoms of oppression. Thank you for chiming in and listening to this. If you would like to read a bit more about these processes, My OSF links are provided here. You can always scan these QR codes and you can learn more about the processes. Thank you.